In the media, they're very harsh on immigrants. People think that none of us work, none of us go to school, we're all criminals, stuff like that. But most of us do take the system seriously. We do go to school and do take care of our responsibilities.
If you could go back in time, would you do this again?
I wouldn't, because it had many consequences after the events. Suddenly, people would listen to Paludan. So if we could go back in time, then no, I definitely wouldn't do it.
You think that he gained support because of what you did?
He got what he came for.
You have to remember that for a long time, politicians have been talking about these areas as not being part of Denmark.
This is Fatema Tunsi, a community activist who also lives in a ghetto. She says the political climate in which immigrants are forced to integrate means that while few Danes are out-and-out racist, extremists like Paludan are getting an easy ride, unable to stigmatize immigrant districts.
I believe that it was the Prime Minister who said that these areas are black holes in the map of Denmark. This is the kind of picture that politicians draw of these areas. So when someone gets in there and tries to provoke residents, there is a segment of society that is prone to support that and see it as a defense of their own rights, when in reality it's just pure provocation and troublemaking, basically, in order to get attention.
The problems for Norbra didn't end there. According to Fatma, the authorities have imposed extraordinary legal measures, doubling the penalty for any offences committed there. Measures that are among those enabled by the ghetto plan.
It just started, escalating more and more to the point where the police used this in order to designate a double punishment zone, which is like all over Nabu and other parts of the city.
So Rasmus Paludan came in here and really provoked these people, and as a result of his actions, the punishment part of the ghetto plan was initiated.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that was, I think, the second time that the double punishment zone was designated by the police ever since the ghetto package was passed into law.
Activists like Fatma have been sounding alarm bells about the ghetto plan ever since it was first introduced. And they're not alone. Outside observers too are expressing concern, even going so far as to say Denmark's immigration law is racist.
The law is sending a message that it's a bad thing to be a criminal, it's a bad thing to be unemployed, it's not such a good thing to have low wages, and we would rather have you have more education than just primary school or secondary school. But it's a really bad thing to be of non-Western origin.
Klaus Jo of Amnesty International.
If we have more than 50% of the tenants are of non-Western background, it can eventually lead us to be able to take away your house, to throw you out on the street, so you can be a very well-educated person of non-Western origin. You're still considered worse than being a criminal. It's worse than being poorly educated. We would say that this is actually institutionalized racism.
Finally, on the 5th of June, Danish voters went to the polling stations. The centre-right and right-wing coalition that first brought in the ghetto plan now faced the electorate, while two far-right parties, including Rasmus Paludan's, were attempting to get into parliament for the first time. For its part, the Social Democrat Party, out of government for 4 years, was hoping its tough stance on immigration would bring it back into power. That night, I went to the Danish parliament as everyone awaited the results.
Okay.
This area has been allocated to Rasmus Paludan's party, and this is actually where he's been waiting. And his talks and his reactions has been filmed from inside of this room. Why are we not allowed to go inside?
Because they don't want the visitors.
Why is that? Do you know?
No, I don't know.
You don't know?
No.
Okay. Well, they don't want any visitors in there. The reason became clear as the results began to come in. It's midnight. 98% of the votes have been counted, and Rasmus Paludan has only received 1.8% of the votes. There is no way he's going to get in now. Meanwhile, down the corridor, the Social Democrats were jubilant. The left-leaning party that likes to see itself as open and enlightened had emerged with the biggest vote. A new Prime Minister-elect was addressing the faithful.
En af de største og vigtigste opgaver foran os.
New Prime Minister in Denmark has been announced, and she's right there. Mette Frederiksen.
Watching the Prime Minister's speech with a massive smile was Signe Heltberg, the Social Democrat candidate I met earlier.
Are you happy?
Yes, I'm very happy.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah.
What do you think this means in terms of integration, the ghetto plan? Where do you think?
Yeah, she said that right now, that she's standing on that same perspective as she has done all the way through.
Which
so
is?
The ghetto plan will be continued. Yeah.
And what's her stance on immigration?
The same.
Then, the new Prime Minister herself, Mette Frederiksen, swept past us. And I couldn't resist asking.
BBC, is Danish immigration policy racist?
No, of course not.
That's all from this edition of Assignment, and me, Sahar Zand. The producer was Mike Gallagher. To hear more stories, go to bbcworldservice.com/assignment.
You're listening to the BBC World Service, home of the world's newsroom.
I'm Nuala McGovern, presenter of BBC OS, which comes to you live every weekday from our newsroom in London. I'm surrounded by hundreds of journalists that are working on all different stories, all with various expertise in different parts of the globe. And you can very much feel the energy, particularly if a story is breaking.
Interestingly, there's been really a lot of coverage recently.
The rumours had been circulating over
I think the thing that is most shocking and
one aspect of the show that I feel is unique and probably contributes to a different sound is that you, the listener, is very much involved.
My name is Abdul from Nigeria, Abuja.
Good day, BBC OS. My name is S.
Hi, this is Dalia Abdul. I'm from Khartoum.
It's very exciting to be at the heart of where news is breaking and developing.
BBC OS, weekdays at 15 GMT.
When is a burger not a burger?
Whoa. I mean, send some over here. I'll let you know if it tastes like bacon or not. I'll be the decider of that. Thank you so much.
On the food chain in a few minutes, find out why the meat industry and plant-based food producers are at war over words and what it might mean for the consumer. That's here on the BBC World Service after the news.
BBC News. The US National Security Advisor John Bolton has described Britain's seizure of an Iranian oil tanker as excellent news. The vessel seized in the Strait of Gibraltar was suspected of carrying 2 million barrels of Iranian oil to Syria in breach of EU sanctions on Damascus. The Iranian Foreign Ministry has described it as an act of piracy. In a new report, the UN suggests there have been thousands of extrajudicial killings in Venezuela. The UN said the government in Caracas had implemented a strategy to criminalise and repress political opponents. The former governor of Rio de Janeiro says he negotiated bribes to secure the Olympic Games for the Brazilian city in 2016. Sergio Cabral told investigators that he arranged for the payment of $2 million to win the support of 9 of the International Olympic Committee's 95 members. A potentially important witness in the investigation into the shooting down of a Malaysian airliner 5 years ago is reported to have been detained in Ukraine. Vladimir Tsimach was involved in organising the air defences of pro-Russia rebels in eastern Ukraine in 2014. President Trump has been accused of politicising Independence Day. The 4th of July celebrations are traditionally non-partisan, but Mr. Trump is preparing to stage a display of tanks in Washington. A new study says there's enough space around the world to replant trees across an area the size of the US. The study says this could reduce carbon dioxide in the atmosphere by 25%. President Putin has warned of a growing concentration of Islamist militants in Libya. He said he's worried they're flowing in from the rebel-held Syrian province of Idlib. Eva Moses-Kor, a survivor of the Nazi Holocaust and advocate of forgiveness, has died aged 85.
Hello and welcome to The Food Chain with me, Manuela Zaragoza. When is a burger not a burger? When is a sausage not a sausage? Silly questions, you might think. But the meat industry and some politicians don't think they're silly at all. They argue words like steak, sausage, burger or ribs can only be used to describe foods that come from an animal. Alternative plant-based products, they argue, should come up with their own names. Signs are the meat industry is winning this argument. Last year, the US state of Missouri banned the word meat from non-meat products. In the same year, France changed its laws to prevent product labels like vegetable steak or soy sausage. And it's not just meat-free products that are being targeted. In 2017, the European Court of Justice ruled that plant-based foods cannot be sold using terms like milk, butter or cheese. So does all of this matter? What's in a name after all? And can you really claim ownership of a word? That's what we're discussing in this episode. So let me introduce our panellists. Willem van Wede is the CEO of Vivera, a veggie and vegan food company based in the Netherlands. Jess Peterson is a senior policy advisor at the US Cattlemen's Association, a trade association and lobbying group that advocates for the interests of American beef farmers. And Carrie Gillen is a linguistics expert, formerly a professor at Arizona State University, but these days she's a co-founder of Quick Brown Fox Consulting and also a co-host of Vocal Fries, a podcast about linguistic discrimination. And I wanted to come to you first, Willem. In the EU, there's a proposal at the moment to ban veggie and vegan products from using names more commonly used to describe meat. And one of your vegetable products, in fact, several of your vegetable products are labelled with words like burger, another one is called a schnitzel, all words more commonly associated with meat. So what are you going to do, and what are you going to call them, if the EU goes ahead with this ban?
I'm a very optimistic person, and I'm pretty convinced that this lobby, this movement, will not go in the direction of not allowing the use of these names. You mentioned that we're using names like burger, schnitzel, and that is only partly true. We always use the name in combination with a prefix like veggie or vegan. So the combination is something that works for consumers, to our opinion.
OK, you say you're optimistic that this won't go ahead, but in 2017, as I mentioned earlier, the European Court of Justice did rule that you can't say things like soya milk. You have to call it a soya drink. So already there's a precedent against your industry, really.
Yeah, I think you're right. There are precedents, and I think there's also a strong societal development towards plant-based, and I think those interests are represented by different politicians and lawmakers. So I'm pretty convinced those are not Europe-wide or US-wide or worldwide developments, but incidents which will give other countries learnings to avoid those mistakes.
But do you sell in France?
Yes, we do sell in France.
So how do you get around the issue there? Because there they've banned things like vegetable steak or soy sausage.
Yeah, well, first of all, we will always abide the law, and we will have to make those modifications. It's a transition phase in France, so there's still a lot of products which have meat combined with veggie in the name. But we also have products which we call a sea burger instead of a fish burger.
A sea burger, OK, that's quite inventive. Does it matter? Do you have any evidence that changing a name that way affects whether or not the product sells?
Well, I think there's a very wide range of people that make the choice to eat plant-based. Some of them are vegan, some of them are meat reducers and would like to try both. Some are people that are in a phase where they're trying to convert from meat to more plant-based or 100% plant-based. It's very difficult to measure, but we have very strong indication from consumer research that having names which are recognizable for them with the habits they have or other members of their family have makes it just so much easier for them to make that choice and make the switch.
So it's familiarity, isn't it, really?
Yes, it's familiarity and habit.
And these are important to being able to sell your product?
Well, the category and the products with pride are called meat substitute products. We're not preaching, we're not making the choice for the consumers, but we're allowing the consumers to make a choice for a meat replacement.
Would you consider changing the names of your products to things like a vegetarian tube for a sausage or a vegetarian disc for a burger?
Sounds very unappealing, and I think it's not helping us in the conversion, which we strongly believe worldwide is very needed towards more plant-based menu.
Jess Peterson of the US Cattlemen's Association, explain to our listeners why you think a company like Willem van Wede's Vivera shouldn't be using words like sausage or burger in labelling of his products.
So we've been eating meat for thousands of years. And it's just in the recent 65 years we've been building a relationship with our consumer that's based on trust and transparency. And in addition to that, we're constantly striving to maintain high levels and actually enhance our production, environmental standards, food safety protocols, taste, and quality. So when a food safety issue comes up, whether it's mad cow disease or E. coli, we're constantly making sure that the consumer is taken care of. We follow food safety guidelines. They know that what we're doing is environmentally promoted, and they know that it's going to taste extremely well. All of that is tied to the names: beef, hamburger, steak. And so by placing these other products out there, there's a confusion.
But do you have actual evidence that it creates confusion in the consumer? Because as a consumer myself, I find the term vegetarian sausage very obvious. I struggle to understand why that would create confusion amongst anyone else.
I can't speak for a plant-based producer of a Petri dish protein. I can't speak to their production. I can't speak to their safety. It's like the last 60 Minutes has been their claim to fame and rushed their products to the market without a lot of transparency. But if 5 years from now or 5 months from now there's a problem with sausage, and that is known worldwide, what's the recall like? Is it tied to, again, the word that we all know, that consumers know, trusted, traditionally produced meat, or is it plant-based? So all of a sudden, we don't know. So when we start using these words out of line and out of sync, it creates confusion in the consumer and can lead to even greater problems down the line.
If I may jump in, the first point of traceability, and I think that's valid for Vivera, but for many food companies, is very clear. If there is a problem with a vegetarian or a vegan burger or a sausage, it's very clear where to find the source, all of the ingredients, and where it has been manufactured. And related to misleading, if ever a consumer would be misled that vegan sausage is actually made of meat, this is a very unlikely event to happen, I believe.
Again, we've seen such a rush, and we think this rush is tied to the immense amount of venture capital being raised. So each month they're responding to their investors saying, is your product getting to market, and where are you at, and where are you selling it? Which is why
just to clarify, when you say rush to market, you mean of plant-based alternatives?
Correct. So we're pushing pause, saying, wait, we need to look at the regulatory side. You referenced it earlier. In the United States, there's a ban on the word meat. Someone asked, do you want to trademark the word meat? No, we don't want to trademark it, but it's being used wrongly. It's a truth in labeling. So we need to push pause. We need to understand the safety ramifications. We need to know more about how these products are developed, and we're not seeing it.
May I respond to the word rush? We actually started this business in 1990, so we're close to 30 years in the trade. I think we have shown that we're acting responsible and consumers are understanding very well what's going on. And you're right, there is a dynamic starting which is fueled by the interest of consumers for sustainability, their feeling of responsibility, ever improved products which are tasting better, and the gap, if there is a gap between our vegetarian products with meat products, has narrowed very much. So I think it's clear there's a heritage already of close to 30 years. It is a strong will of consumers to make the transition, and they have hurdles to overcome to break habits in terms of previous usage. So this is a great opportunity to allow people to make that choice. It's their own choice. They choose vegan or they choose animal-based.
Jess?
Well, so I appreciate where the gentleman is coming from with regards to what his company is doing. But not all the other companies are playing like that. They're not playing above board. They're rushing this to the market. They're changing some words. We've had our own federal regulators push back on these Petri dish proteins for misrepresenting their product. And again, if something goes wrong, we're the first ones to get brought forward. Fine textured lean beef was blasted all over the place as pink slime. We had to step forward, talk about what we were doing, talk about the safety side of it, and add another level of, again, I keep going back to transparency. So we're really at the infancy stage of how these companies, again, are communicating with the consumer. And we take that very seriously.
I think in all lines of business, there's purity and there's examples of less pure approach. I'm thinking back of some scandals we've had with horse meat being sold as cow meat.
Horse meat was basically posing as beef when it wasn't beef.
Yeah, and I would say that both in plant-based industry and in meat-based industry, there's very good examples in being honest and pure, and there's examples of not being so pure.
Jess, I mean, there will be people listening who say it's not really about health. This is about the market share for meat being eaten into.
So, first off, if you're a vegetarian, we completely understand your decision, your choice. We're hoping that someday you'll just miss that pure, natural taste and the best lean, iron-based food you can get with some steak or the sizzle of a tried-and-true burger, and you'll start coming back to us. But in any case, if you're a vegetarian, that's fine. If you walk into a grocery store, there should be certain aisles that says non-animal-based products. You should have the right to shop there. Consumer rules.
So you don't believe that these products should be sold alongside meat products either in the supermarket?
No, because if someone buys that product and they see it and it says some type of steak or beef product, a hamburger, and they bring that product home, they grill it up, and they start looking around, then all of a sudden as they dig through the ingredients, they go, wait, this is not even traditionally produced meat. But the price point was there, the environmental standard they're claiming is there. I think we like it. So from that perspective, they've deceptively used.
This is DJ Analyst alongside DJ Prospect. Check us out on Friday nights from 8 to 9 p.m. for the best in R&B, hip-hop, soca, and reggae gospel music, as well as discussions here on SPR Live FM.
Proudly send them our full range of products and allow them to taste and take their decision what they like better. And I'm pretty sure that people understand what is the actual meaning of the product, what's the actual content, as long as you clearly mark that it's not just beef burger or burger, but that it is plant-based, vegan, etc.
I still am baffled by the fact there's so much innovation in these plant-based, cell-based products. Yet the lack in innovation in marketing is just mind-numbing to me. Then I'll leave my point out. But furthermore, yes, that meat counter, there are things that happen that we directly take responsibility for. We as an production industry have to make changes. Everything from what's happening on the farm or ranch, in the feed situation, at the processing facility, everything has to be addressed to get that product to that meat counter. So to have anything being thrown in there just because, oh, well, we're going to put a label on it, call it meat, and it's in the meat counter. It just baffles me. And I don't think listeners would be on board with saying, you're now leaving the meat aisle. It's going into the mystery aisle. It's been the meat aisle for 60 years. Now it's becoming the meat mystery aisle for who has food safety, recalls. We don't know the effects of these ingredients. We don't know any long-term results. We're talking about, does meat cause cancer? So there's always this debate going back and forth. We know that everything causes cancer when you get down to it. But when you look at safety proportion or healthy proportions of meat, it doesn't cause cancer. It's a healthy part of your lifestyle. So we're constantly making these interactions as there's confusion with the public. So now we're saying, okay, are all these products in plant-based? Is that right for every diet? Again, it's a mystery aisle versus a meat aisle. There's a lot of research, a lot of relationship that goes into it, and we stand very serious in that relationship with consumers.
Carrie Gillan, you've been quiet up to now. Tell me, does it surprise you to see this much argument over what is something we say every day, meat, sausage, burger?
No, not at all. In fact, there are people who argue about the meaning of the word sandwich. Is a taco a sandwich? So I'm not surprised at all that people want to fight over what the meaning of words are.
But what do you make of this particular discussion? I mean, is meat something? I mean, obviously, I refer to you again, Jess, you can't trademark it, put it that way.
Right.
Yeah. So can you have a segment of the economy, of a population, basically claim ownership of a word?
So as a linguist, I would say it's a bad idea to try to do that. Words mean what a community think that it means. And so, yes, generally speaking, if you say the word meat, people understand that to mean flesh of an animal. But it didn't always used to mean that. In fact, it used to be the cover word for all food, and you had to say flesh meat to refer to meat.
When was this? How long ago are we talking here?
So it's a long time ago. So 1300-ish is when it switched to mean only flesh of an animal. So words can change meaning over time, and it's, I think, foolish for us to try to nail words down to mean only one thing. And also when it comes to something like the word meat, it's not like the companies are saying, hey, this is a burger. They're saying chickpea burger, black bean burger. They're giving you some sort of information about what kind of burger it is. So I don't think it's confusing at all. And in fact, actually in the 1940s, in order to sort of force the fact that most burgers are made out of beef, there was this use of the word beef burger to contrast it with any other kind of burger.
Jess, do you accept that? I mean, yeah, there was a time when you would say beef burger. You wouldn't just say burger. In fact, I think some people still do refer to it as a beef burger.
Even that phrase, a different type of burger. So it's P with burger. Okay, so does that mean there's hamburger there at all? Are there any other ingredients? I guess I would turn that to the rest of us, and since we're talking from a linguistics perspective, and I appreciate that, imitation crab. Is there any real crab in imitation crab? Can we just say off the top of our heads? When we walk to the dairy counter, what makes what we'd say water, what's been called almond milk, how did that become that? So at what point do we take kind of a greater ethos and ethics to say, wait, why are we trying to use these words? As we mentioned, there's a bit of an evolution, but to keep in mind, when we said beef burger, we were really driving home the point. That's what it is, and there is an actual product tied to it. Now we're saying something that's not even traditionally linked to a description. We're making up new definitions, all to market it to the consumer. So if you had your own product, what we can't understand is if you're so proud of what your food tastes like, come up with a name. Don't just grab ours and say, we know burgers taste good, that's why we'd like to mismatch one of our own.
Okay, let's take that word burger. What's the origin of the word, Carrie?
It's from Hamburg. So it's a hamburger person who lives in Hamburg.
So it has nothing to do with meat in the first place?
Originally, no. I mean, words do change their meaning over time, and I don't want to get too trapped in the etymological fallacy. But, yeah, traditionally, it doesn't have anything to do with meat.
Are there some words you think should only ever be used with meat? For example, steak.
I hesitate to say that there's ever a hard and fast line when it comes to the meaning of words, because a community decides what they mean. Steak does have a closer tie to the meaning of meat because it has to do with a particular cut of meat, and ham also refers to a particular cut of pig. However, I'm not tied to any one word having the exact same meaning over time.
So perhaps, Jess, maybe some words are, yours and some words aren't.
Again, it goes back to a relationship with the consumer. As we mentioned, the hamburgers, it's been very helpful, came from Hamburg. And then with the marketing, it built that relationship. For instance, the phrase beef, it's what's for dinner, in the United States is an extremely well-known phrase. We used our own dollars to work with consumers in advertising and interactions and promotions to say beef, it's what's for dinner. And now someone says, hey, great, we just got done with our lab-based product here, and we're beef, it's what's for dinner. We want to be the burger you choose.
Well, it's as Willem said, isn't it, that people are looking for familiarity. Carrie, can you see the meat industry in a position where it can shape the debate in that way? Because I imagine at the end of the day, it's how consumers refer to it that will really be the decisive factor here. If consumers keep referring to these products as vegetarian sausages, veggie burgers, there's only so much the meat industry can do.
Right. So it would just come down to the brand names. So, yeah, consumers will call it wherever they want to call it. I think the only real impact will be on companies that need to change the name of their products. And maybe one of those names would become the generic name, so the beef industry would indirectly convince consumers to pick up a new word. But that would just be because it's the most popular or the most bought product.
Can I give you another example? We recently launched vegan bacon strips. It's very clear. It tells exactly what people are expecting. If you would name that product salty strips or something like that, which I can't come up with a more descriptive name.
Can I just stop you there? Vegan bacon strips. I mean, couldn't you have said bacon flavoured? I mean, they're obviously not bacon strips.
No, but I think it's very clear for the consumer what it is and what it tastes like, and it gives them exactly the experience they want. And they have in vegan a clear description of what the product is.
In that situation, and I'm interested to hear what Carrie says here as well, bacon says to me pork.
Words do have sort of a core meaning, this prototypical meaning. So like bacon, we would think prototypically is pork, but when we add vegan to it, then we say, okay, it has all the other properties of bacon, just not the pork part. So it's got the kind of smoky flavor, it's got the crispiness, etc.
Well, I think consumers are used to eat bacon if it's pork-based, and this allows them to complete their meal to something they know. And if you try to describe it in a way which is fuzzy and not clear, you're not giving them the opportunity to make the choice for that experience.
But is it bacon because it looks? Is it the shape of bacon? Is that what it is?
Well, there's the taste, there's the texture, and there's the look of it.
Wait, that's from his perspective. Whoa. I mean, send some over here. I'll let you know if it tastes like bacon or not. I'll give you my address. I'll be the decider of that. Thank you so much. And again, with all due respect, you're just walking through our meat aisle stealing our names and then wondering why is there confusion? What's next? And so I would just encourage you folks to be a little more creative with your names. I mean, bacon is a particular cut. I think bacon predates the cheeseburger, if I'm not correct here, Carrie. So I don't know. Bill, I guess, go with your thoughts.
If I may respond, the essence of the discussion is that we're trying to advise politicians to make a well-balanced decision. And you just mentioned you're walking through our aisle, which sort of indicates that the aisle is owned by some manufacturers or industry. And I think the aisles are a territory where consumers can make their choices. It's not owned by anybody. It's very dynamic. It's changing. And I challenge everybody to try those products and make their own choice.
And also, nobody owns words either, except for trademarked words. And bacon is certainly not trademarkable.
Sure, but Jess's point is that these words come with a history, that the history that his industry has been very instrumental in shaping. Why not come up with something completely different? I mean, would people not buy it if it didn't say bacon in it?
Well, the purpose is in itself is not to be creative, but is to be clear to consumers. if with creativity you can get something which brings the message across in a better way, we will definitely do that.
Okay, a final a question for Willem and Carrie. I'd like your input on this as well. Let's say the European Union Parliament does vote against, allowing words like steak, sausage and burger to be used in foods that don't come from an animal. So basically that would impact your business quite a lot, Willem. What would you, if pressed, use as a replacement name?
Let me start by saying that would be a huge mistake, and that we would continue doing everything to convince politicians to see the bigger picture and the importance of helping the transition.
Sure, but let's say they don't.
You never know. In that case, we have no other option, non-desire, to come with descriptive names which are appetizing and give an explanation of what it is. Then you come to words like patty or gouillons. I would aim to stay as close as possible to something that describes what it is.
Carrie, what do you make of that?
I would avoid any name that sounds even remotely icky, like tube. But some of the strategies that other companies have used are things like chicken with like an apostrophe. So it's not actually chicken, but it's chicken-like.
So bacon with an apostrophe between the O and the N.
Right. Something like that.
That wouldn't fool Jess, though. Wouldn't fool Jess.
But I don't think that, unless the law was written in such a way that you're not allowed to do that, that would be one strategy I might use.
Yeah, and would that appeal to you, Willem?
It's a trick, and if it works, if it remains clear to the consumer and it's legally allowed, that could be a solution, but that's not the real solution. The real solution is to altogether make a wise decision and leave the choice